Hi, this is a conversation with Christian Sandström. He is a PhD and researcher at the Ratio Institute in Sweden. And Christian, let's talk about the relationship between an entrepreneurial perspective on current research, especially in disruptive technologies. Is there a relationship, or are there parting ways?
So my background then is I wrote my doctoral dissertation on disruptive technologies and the challenges that they imply for established companies. If you take, for instance, the shift to digital photography, you see how firms that used to dominate the industry no longer do so after the shift then from analog to digital photography. And my research focused on how you can explain those challenges that the companies encounter. So really a process of creative destruction in a very Schumpeterian way. It happened in the camera industry, and it has happened in a whole range of other industries. And one current example that I'm looking into is the Finnish mobile phone manufacturer Nokia, and how it has struggled in the transition to smartphones. And what seems to be the case here is that Nokia and other similar companies, they really were late to the transition to smartphones. And partly I think that can be explained by adopting more of an Austrian perspective on markets, where markets are not static, they're not predefined, but rather they are transformed. They are recreated by entrepreneurial companies, in this case, Apple.
Can we talk more about the concept of creative destruction?
Sure.
Which seems opposite.
Yes.
Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So it originates with the Austrian economist Joseph Schumpeter, who in the early 20th century pointed out that the original source of economic growth is innovation, that you introduce new products, new technologies, new ways of organizing, and that is, in the long run, what creates prosperity. Now, Schumpeter, while pointing that out, he also said that when you introduce something new, it will displace former technologies, former ways of working. It will create turbulence in the economy. And one such pattern is, of course, when you introduce new technology, you see how all those skills, all those competencies related to the former technology become obsolete. So creative destruction is you create something new, but at the same time you destroy the old. And that is, to Schumpeter, really how economic growth happens in the long term.
So in this context, it is not enough to be innovative. You have to be entrepreneurial. Which means?
Yes, you're right. It is not enough to come up with new technologies, but as there is a process of creative destruction, you see how not only your own competencies as a company need to be renewed, but also these skills of your customer might be renewed. And therefore, you need to be entrepreneurial in the sense that you do not have a static relationship to customers and markets, but rather you try to change how markets function, how customers behave. You change the meaning of a product. And currently what we've seen, I think, with Nokia's inability to shift to smartphones is that this is what was lacking, an ability to act entrepreneurially in the sense of proactively transforming markets. They had a very static relationship to the market when they had such a dominant position.
So in this environment, from the point of view of a businessman or an administrator, what are the skills needed to prosper?
The skills needed are quite the opposite ones of the ones that a large company normally develops. Large companies become good at administrating business. It's called business administration, what we teach after all. And that is a problem for them. Another problem is that a large company can only bother about a large market. That's what they care about. That's what they prioritize. But everything new starts by definition as something small, right? And that means large companies must learn how to think small and how to act small. And that is quite difficult for them very often. They also need to be able to change their established business models, their ways of making money, and questioning their own customs, their own ways of practicing. Normally they don't have the time to do that. They don't have the ability to prioritize. And if you look at the way most companies are run in terms of how they allocate resources, they use some kind of net present value analysis. And the net present value, if you are to compare something new with something old that you already know, with the old thing, you know the market, you know how big it is, you know it's quite certain everything. With something new, the net present value becomes a different calculation because you don't know how big the market is. You don't know how much you're going to be able to charge. You don't know. It is uncertain. Therefore, you get a discount rate which is higher. So those mechanisms of allocating resources are often biased towards existing businesses rather than new ones. And large companies must unlearn some of those practices.
Finally, Christian, if a student approaches you and asks, Christian, where can I read something more about these issues? Can you recommend something?
Well, I would, of course, recommend my own doctoral dissertation, which is a very amusing piece to read. I do have some material available online at www.disruptiveinnovation.se. Some articles can also be found there, some slides, presentations, etc. So that is an area where you could start.
Well, thank you very much, Christian, for sharing these with us, and thank you too.
Thanks, Luis.